Now David's son Absalom had a beautiful sister named Tamar, and Amnon, her half-brother, fell desperately in love with her. Amnon became so obsessed with Tamar that he became ill. Her brother Absalom saw her and asked, "Is it true that Amnon has been with you?" "Well, my sister, keep quiet for now, since he's your brother. Don't you worry about it." So Tamar lived as a desolate woman in her brother Absalom's house. Absalom told his men, "Wait until Amnon gets drunk. Then at my signal, kill him. Don't be afraid. I'm the one who is given the command. Take courage and do it." So at Absalom's signal, they murdered Amnon. Then the other sons of the king jumped on their mules and fled. What's up, cool people? My name's Matt. Before we dive in, I think I said this in the main body of the recording, but I'll say it here anyway. Bit of a content/trigger warning related to abuse, specifically sexual abuse. So yeah, just be warned. This chapter might not exactly be appropriate for all ages. The Bible is not 100% like PG content, and this is one of those chapters that is very much not that. But anyway, with that out of the way, welcome back to our Bible study. Okay, so we're looking at 2 Samuel chapter 13 right off the bat. Gonna give a little disclaimer as far as the topics that this covers. A, possible trigger warning. B, there's some, more adult content. So, not everything in the Bible is appropriate for all ages necessarily. So, yeah, view at your own discretion. But, yeah. So, David's king, fully established, no real opposition to that. He has recently kind of messed up relationally, slept with another man's wife, which he wasn't supposed to do. Nobody was really supposed to do that. Tried to get the guy killed. And, yeah, then God clearly didn't like the stuff that David was doing. And now we're gonna have some more troubles going on. So it's not all smooth sailing for David throughout his kingship, but we'll actually get into this and see what happens rather than me, trying to preempt it. So here we go, 2 Samuel chapter 13. Now David's son Absalom had a beautiful sister named Tamar, and Amnon, her half-brother, fell desperately in love with her. Amnon became so obsessed with Tamar that he became ill. She was a virgin, and Amnon thought he could never have her. Rightfully, he should never have had her. We'll see what happens there, but this, you're seeing complicated family dynamics here. That's, I know I've said this before with people who had multiple wives in the Bible, but just another example. It's just because it happens and God doesn't, directly, immediately punish it in some obvious way, that doesn't mean it's a good idea. So, David's son, Absalom, had a sister, Tamar. Now, I wouldn't think, generally speaking, the wives would have had multiple husbands. Even though husbands had multiple wives sometimes back then. But I think it's trying to be more specific that, okay, Absalom and Tamar are, they have same parents. Amnon, on the other hand, did not have both of the same parents. maybe same father, being David, and different mother. That seems the most likely scenario. But anyway, yeah. Still, they were all related in some way. They all had at least one similar parent, I think. But let's move along. This chapter isn't exactly short. Verse 3. But Amnon had a very crafty friend, his cousin Jonadab. He was the son of David's brother Shimeah. One day Jonadab said to Amnon, "What's the trouble? Why should the son of a king look so dejected morning after morning?" So Amnon told him, "I am in love with Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister." "Well," Jonadab said, "I'll tell you what to do. Go back to bed and pretend you are ill. When your father comes to see you, ask him to let Tamar come and prepare some food for you. Tell him you'll feel better if she prepares it as you watch and feeds you with her own hands." Crafty might be putting it nicely there for Jonadab. Also, note there at Shimeah, the Hebrew includes an H, but same person compared to First Chronicles. We're not in First Chronicles yet, have not gotten there yet. But presumably by this note, once we get to that, it's talking about the same person. But anywho, so Jonadab has basically given Amnon a plan to get to end up in a situation where he and Tamar are alone. And we'll just see the progression from there. Verse 6. So Amnon lay down and pretended to be sick. And when the king came to see him, Amnon asked him, "Please let my sister Tamar come and cook my favorite dish, as I watch. Then I can eat it from her own hands." So David agreed and sent Tamar to Amnon's house to prepare some food for him. Now it says to Amnon's house, implying they were in different houses. I suppose it's possible with, like, you know, being the royal family and having, you know, as successful a kingdom as David seemed to have. Or at least as prosperous, I should say. So, it seems Amnon and Tamar are going to end up being alone at some point in this. The part that says favorite dish could be rendered as a couple of cakes. Cakes of what? It's not made clear, but in any case, Tamar is going to go where Amnon is and prepare some food in front of him. Or at least that's what's being communicated. Okay, verse 8. When Tamar arrived at Amnon's house, she went to the place where he was lying down so he could watch her mix some dough. Then she baked his favorite dish for him. But when she set the serving tray before him, he refused to eat. "Everyone get out of here," Amnon told his servants. So they all left. Okay, now they're really, truly alone. Then we get to verse 10. Then he said to Tamar, "Now bring the food into my bedroom and feed it to me here." So Tamar took his favorite dish to him. But as she was feeding him, he grabbed her and demanded, "Come to bed with me, my darling sister." "No, my brother," she cried. "Don't be foolish. Don't do this to me. Such wicked things aren't done in Israel. Where could I go in my shame? And you would be called one of the greatest fools in Israel. Please, Just speak to the king about it, and he will let you marry me." But Amnon wouldn't listen to her. And since he was stronger than she was, he raped her. Then suddenly Amnon's love turned to hate, and he hated her even more than he had loved her. "Get out of here," he snarled at her. "No, no," Tamar cried. "Sending me away now is worse than what you have already done to me." But Amnon wouldn't listen to her. He shouted for his servant and demanded, "Throw this woman out and lock the door behind her." Okay. I'll pause there for a bit. Yeah, so, obviously not good stuff there on Amnon's part. It was literally against the Jewish law to do such things, I'm fairly certain. Yeah, because I seem to remember a bunch of laws that were mentioned regarding, like, interfamilial relations. Pretty sure this goes against one, if not multiple of those. And, like, Tamar tries to, like, make it, at least make it better, try to talk some reason into Amnon, but he's not listening. He probably doesn't care at that point. He's too just, like, driven by his lust, his passion, whatever you want to call it. And then, for whatever reason, it's not even stated why, suddenly his affection turns to anger and hatred. And, like, then the fact that he's, like, not, continuing along the path of what would have been standard practice after the first thing he did. It's like that is even more against their laws and practices. So, yeah, bad stuff on Amnon's part. A lot of bad stuff. I mean, I'm not going to compare it necessarily to what David did a couple of chapters earlier, but it's bad stuff. So he shouts for his servant to take her away. Then verse 18. So the servant put her out and locked the door behind her. She was wearing a long, beautiful robe, as was the custom in those days for the king's virgin daughters. But now Tamar tore her robe and put ashes on her head, and then, with her face in her hands, she went away crying. Her brother Absalom saw her and asked, "Is it true that Amnon has been with you?" "Well, my sister, keep quiet for now, since he's your brother. Don't you worry about it." So Tamar lived as a desolate woman in her brother Absalom's house. So the direct brother Absalom, not the half-brother Amnon, is now, like, at least trying to comfort her, possibly going to come to her defense, and so the sign that, or at least part of the sign that she was a virgin with the robe and all that, is now ripped because she's no longer a virgin. And let's see here. Note right there. Rather than beautiful robe, could possibly be rendered as robe with sleeves or an ornamented robe, based on that note there. Meaning of the Hebrew is uncertain, but probably something along those lines, you would guess. Something some not just like standard boring robe. Although robe with sleeves, But maybe the robes didn't normally have sleeves. Anyway, okay, so then we get to verse 21. When King David heard what had happened, he was very angry. And though Absalom never spoke to Amnon about this, he hated Amnon deeply because of what he had done to his sister. Unsurprisingly. And David's angry. Dead Sea Scrolls in Greek version add, but he did not punish his son Amnon because he loved him, for he was his firstborn. Okay. So, I mean, based on that, it seems that maybe David isn't going to do anything despite his anger. But this brings further strain to the extended family relations, for sure. Then we'll get to verse 23. 2 years later, when Absalom's sheep were being sheared at Baal Hazor near Ephraim, Absalom invited all the king's sons to come to a feast. He went to the king and said, "My sheep shearers are now at work. Would the king and his servants please come to celebrate the occasion with me?" The king replied, "No, my son. If we all came, we would be too much of a burden on you." Absalom pressed him, but the king would not come, though he gave Absalom his blessing. "Well then," Absalom said, "if you can't come, how about sending my brother Amnon with us?" "Why Amnon?" the king asked. But Absalom kept on pressing the king until he finally agreed to let all his sons attend, including Amnon. So Absalom prepared a feast fit for a king. It seems like an innocent enough premise, but David's concerned that it's going to be too much of a hassle for Absalom, essentially. Or it's worded here as too much of a burden on you. So, I can kind of understand David's concern, but like if Absalom thinks he's got it, then not quite sure why it would seem like so much of an imposition. But anyway, eventually David kind of caves to his son Absalom, at least to the extent of letting all of David's other sons join him for this feast. Note there, as in Greek and Latin versions, Hebrew text lacks this sentence about Absalom preparing the feast, I guess. So, he mentions Amnon specifically. It's not stated why directly, but considering just before this it was mentioning his deep hatred of Amnon, he might have been trying to use this as an opportunity for revenge. We don't... maybe we'll get there. But I'm also noting in here, and if the note in verse 21 is to be believed, that David is kind of soft on his sons. Like, with Amnon, it seems there was no punishment for the bad thing that he did. And with Absalom, it seems that he's just kind of caving into what Absalom wants. Mostly, at least. So, seems David maybe wasn't the strictest father figure. But anyway, that's just me kind of thinking about what's said here and reading a little bit of my own thoughts into it. So anyway, then we get to verse 28. Absalom told his men, "Wait until Amnon gets drunk. Then at my signal, kill him. Don't be afraid. I'm the one who is given the command. Take courage and do it." So at Absalom's signal, they murdered Amnon. Then the other sons of the king jumped on their mules and fled. As they were on the way back to Jerusalem, this report reached David. "Absalom has killed all the king's sons. Not one is left alive." The king got up, tore his robe, and threw himself on the ground. His advisors also tore their clothes in horror and sorrow. But just then Jonadab, the son of David's brother Shimea, arrived and said, "No, don't believe that all the king's sons have been killed. It was only Amnon. Absalom has been plotting this ever since Amnon raped his sister Tamar. No, my lord the king, your sons aren't all dead. It was only Amnon." Okay. So, Absalom gets his revenge on Amnon. The other sons flee, possibly out of a fear for their own lives. But it may potentially have been a bit disorganized. And that might be some of the implication there by it saying they jumped on their mules and fled. And then an inaccurate report makes it to David while his other sons are on the way back to Jerusalem. But then Jonadab, the clever one, was that... I think that was how they described Jonadab earlier. Anyway, Jonadab, the one who kind of made up the plot for Amnon to be with Tamar, comes in and corrects the report that no, it wasn't all the other sons that died. It was just Amnon. Maybe he felt a little guilty for his part in Amnon's plan and the ensuing, tension between him and Absalom. Or maybe he was just kind of in that information loop. But either way, he corrects it. Okay, then we get to verse 34. Meanwhile, Absalom escaped. Then the watchman on the Jerusalem wall saw a great crowd coming down the hill on the road from the west. He ran to tell the king, "I see a crowd of people coming from the Horonaim road along the side of the hill." "Look," Jonadab told the king, "there they are now. The king's sons are coming, just as I said." They soon arrived, weeping and sobbing, and the king and all his servants wept bitterly with them. And David mourned many days for his son Amnon. Absalom fled to his grandfather, Talmai, son of Ammihud, the king of Geshur. He stayed there in Geshur for 3 years, and King David, now reconciled to Amnon's death, longed to be reunited with his son Absalom. Okay, so that's all we get for this chapter. A couple of notes to look into. Hebrew lacks this sentence about telling the king that he sees a crowd of people. I guess whether or not the Watchman said that, that could still lead Jonadab to say, look, here they are. Your sons are coming. So they all, I mean, they still mourned over the death of Amnon. Understandable. He's still a family member, even though he did those bad things. But Absalom manages to flee and not, get punished for what he did. So 3 years he lived elsewhere. Note there, Dead Sea Scrolls in Greek version read, and the spirit of the king now reconciled to Amnon's death. I mean, spirit's a major part of one's being, so same general gist there. Or no longer felt a need to go out after Absalom. Well, that's a bit of a different meaning. That would read it as something more like, maybe David was searching for Absalom for some sort of reconciliation, whether it be punishment or correction or whatever. In any case, after 3 years, David's attitude changed, and maybe it set the stage for Absalom to make a return. But I guess we'll have to wait and see about that in other chapters. That does it for 2 Samuel 13. So, yeah, Amnon did some bad stuff there. Absalom also did some bad stuff. That was kind of punishment on Amnon for what he did in a way. I'm not saying it's any more excusable, but, it's at least more understandable, in my opinion. But what's good and bad does not come down to our opinions. It comes down to what God views as right and wrong. And this is why Jesus' death and resurrection is good for us, because we don't have to worry about all those minute details of whether or not we're following every letter of the Old Testament law. The way to a right relationship with God is it's more so about the relationship now than it is just, the letter of the law. But anyway, a little side tangent done there. So Amnon's dead. Absalom has exiled himself, kind of. And we'll see what happens from there, I guess. But, as always, like and share if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel if you're on YouTube, or give me a follow on other platforms. Whatever you got to do to keep up with my latest activity. If you want other ways of doing that, take a look down in the description for links to my social media pages, and that'll give you an easy way to follow those. Also, recent development. We've passed 300 subscribers, so going to be working on a supporter page. Not entirely sure how soon that's going to be up, but target is definitely by the end of the year. So anybody who's looking to support what I do here financially in any way, and maybe get a little bit of reward in return, that's going to be coming. If you have any ideas or suggestions for that, let me know down in the comments, along with any other thoughts you have. So, anyway, that's all I got. Hope you're all doing well. Hopefully I'll see you soon for another video. But whatever the case is, till next time, stay cool, people.